Again, good morning, Geshe Thabkhe, and good evening to all those that are online. Also, hello to Katrina again, thanking you both for sharing these extraordinary teachings with us. I want to remind everyone that is watching online that the prayers that we begin and end with are on SravastIAbbey.org. If you scroll down to where it says Guide to Abbey Online Programs, click that open, scroll a little bit down, you'll find prayers and recitations. That's easy to find. And then also to remind folks that Geshe Thabkhe has been very generous in allowing space for questions at the end of each session about the last half hour. So if you have a question about the material that's covered in class, be sure to cite the relevant page number and the verse number so that Katrina, our interpreter, can find it quickly, and that will help her be able to communicate your question to Geshe Thabkhe. And then you can write your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you are not registered and seeing this through the Zoom platform, but are watching on YouTube, YouTube Live, then send your question to office.sravasti@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll start with our recitations. To the teacher endowed, transcended destroyer, oneness gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcended destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden fountain, flame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall a rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kam Niryatayami I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah, this one. That's all. Oh yeah. Oh, that yeah. Oh, to kill a male, right? Or somebody kill a male. And then many says, Ned Juni Pansalas. Many says, Ned Juni Pansalas. Can I touch many temper Savata? When you do that, then go about that to see them. Says a Pansa, regular says, temper Sas. Oh, says somebody. It's on the Sugra. Then I have never to see that con Nazasinani, Yanga Yuba. Oh, she had that today, Yanga Chamber Yuba, Hakone. To me, thinking about Hakone, Nanny Shishas. Since that Nazati Carison is so many Nasam, Nelly Judy, Yamucha Hako Asagosam, Amjisalundura, Nanny Shisha, Nelly Judy. Amjigo, that Nazati Shase. And the man did that disource Lagua. So it's a negative Juni, negative duty, nothing try it and that. Yeah, negative duty by it and that. Then she's a negative. Then I told just that you're another try it and that. Trying it, they would say, I was in there and that. Man, the song of the S, it's a material. Oh, dinner, she's a daughter. Then she's a negative, then it's a negative. To me, it's a tambo marajo, near so be to me, let to me some time. Koya to me some time. Right. What in it? To me, samata. That to me, the two carina some. To me, Julie samata. To me, Judy Shenda, Chigi Neba. So Rani Yene, Samutanda, the course of the less Satan. You got the Shira. To me, Judah say. That the male sweat and Dalla Payat and Dalia, and then go back. Nesole Kisi to me, Payat and Dalia. Shall I show up on the Miki was super, Kiwas to be a. Only Tarva to be a Tandalia, Tanzida, Nagiada, Trato, Jessim, the Otezukaga, Nurtagores, Pagores, Shiba Shenene, Tembashi Yamis Chemuda, Otizisona, yeah.
So here, as for what to begin with, from the Uttara Tantra, or sometimes translated as the Sublime Continuum by Maitreya, there is a verse in which he likens our situation to being like an illness. So like an illness, we need to know our sickness. And then once we know that we are sick, we need to then seek out, well, what are the causes of my sickness? In order to then be free of that, we have to pursue then those methods by which we can be cured, freed of our illness. And so likewise, when it comes to our situation within samsara, our suffering situation, first we need to think about suffering. We need to contemplate our suffering situation and know that kind of suffering in order to then look at, well, what is the cause of this suffering? In the same way that if you were trying to treat an illness, you would first recognize that there is an illness and then seek out the causes of that, and then can make efforts to abandon it by pursuing that state of health, by pursuing the state of freedom from that illness. And so for the sake of removing our suffering, we need to identify those causes of our suffering and thereby pursue the kinds of methods to get out of this situation. So we need to know what it is that is creating our suffering and recognize that we need to practice things like the 10 abandoning the 10 non-virtues and pursuing the 10 virtuous actions and so forth, looking at the causes as being our grasping at a self, and all of the other afflictions that arise from that are jealousy and pride and so forth. And so we need to try to reduce those in order to reduce our suffering. This is where the practice of the Four Noble Truths is like understanding an illness.
Oh yeah, no tea in Duka show that. Narazo Nima Rere ko Samro Stanche. Oh, the next job send it out to Denge Mare Chico Re, Shive Cheso, Nikiora Santua Reku Yore. Annual Kena to meet in the Vital Kena to meet in the Tendula Kena to meet in the Samra. Oh, the next to meet the Kaya Kendalia. And it to meet the Dukaris Society. And it make you also. National Sokata, make us to the Santara. Or tell it any of the years. Take the Niasongi to me, Taret and Dala. Niasongi to me in Goya and Gogotoret and Dalia. Oh, that man thinking is something. Getting him only at me. Shall say some use to so Chiva Majimba and Bologna, so what. Oh, didn't you mess and some local? Oh, what the teachers.
Low. Oh yeah. No.
What did Tambu teach Lambda? Koso?
Koso.
What did you from there?
No. So we, on a daily basis, we should be thinking about the fact that we aren't going to remain forever, but rather we have to die. And after we die, we have to take a rebirth. And in order to know where we are going to be reborn, this is dependent upon the kind of causes that we are creating. So we need to think about the fact that if we are to die and say take rebirth in the hell realms, the kinds of sufferings that we would have to experience. And so we recognize that those sufferings are a result of all of our negative actions. Things like having covetousness and malice and all of the non-virtuous actions lead to those kinds of states. And so in order to avoid that, we should think like, oh, I'm taking this medicine. I'm taking the medicine of not committing those non-virtuous actions and refrain from stealing and killing and so forth in order to make sure that you're not going to end up with that suffering. It's like taking a medicine.
Oh yeah, then I say, we don't make some. Oh, made a lot in a Kevayena to make it to Samata, Milikana to Melesoba, and then Halayinako, Chiti and Nasser, Hala to Mayora, La Chigala Moliani, Lule Timotret, and Medo Chimani Bachava Sobata, and then I share on a Teni Meduval Soba could chill there. You do any? House and Dagata could sing it as a loss of the shot. Medo Chimana view to the Nimbachado, Tedesha to Mabuyora. Oh, Tedesam Dame, Sada Miller, Kawakina, to make it a Shilla Madeva. Oh, Teda, to make it a tag, make it certainly. Tangzis and Santanga, Narawa, Society, Shella, Savachin, and Chepabatabo. Oh, today not in the summit Metasha, Dame by Yesam. Anything not yet, quite Kichi, the Shada, Novo, Neta, Lulo, Jakangar, Shinjachan, Chigimasa. Anything Dimadishona, Condu Chigimasa. Any Trado Chigimasa. Nepsin, Logel, so what Chigimasa. Needing a mess, and I should have. Narazo Mesa. Yes, so to Melitay to the Messiah, so chicken members of Limit, St. So chicken mess, some good, the Messiah, Nashida, quality at the Rimbi, never so in some young Zinda, Tanzinda, Nageda, Trado, and Dansinda, Napsin, Sim to you know, checking some can go to go be some nearing and some town and the mess are there. Or the go many temperatures or nearing to do some town to many outdoor.
So then we can continue by thinking about the sufferings of samsara in general. So even if we are to be born in a good rebirth, as say a god or a human, we aren't beyond this suffering nature. We still have to experience, like as a human, the sufferings of sickness and death. And even as a god, one experiences these kinds of sufferings, wherein at the time of death, there are certain signs that occur, like their flowers, their garlands becoming old, and the sort of beautiful smell that they have going away, and others kind of separate away from them. They don't want to be away from them or don't want to be near them. And so even in those kinds of pleasant rebirths, those good rebirths, you're going to have to experience suffering. They're not beyond that nature of suffering. So the medicine for this, the medicine for getting rid of the sufferings of samsara, is to cultivate an understanding of selflessness, recognizing that this grasping at an I, this apprehension of an I or a self, and then all of the afflictions that come out of it, like pride and jealousy and so forth, these are creating the causes for our continued rebirth in samsara. And so we should be thinking that I'm not going to allow myself to engage in those kinds of minds. I'm not going to allow myself to become angry or covetous or competitive, do anything that is going to lead to that continued cycle. And so it's like we're on a daily basis taking a medicine. Our medicine to avoid the suffering of the lower realms is to avoid any of those kinds of actions that are harmful to others. Things like are being competitive or being angry, being hostile. Those sorts of actions are going to lead to those sufferings. So by eliminating those, we are then taking this medicine that helps us to avoid the sufferings of the lower realms. And as for avoiding the sufferings of samsara, working at understanding how this grasping at an I and all of the various afflictions that arise from that can be reduced. We can eliminate that through cultivating an understanding of selflessness. This is, if we think about it like we are taking medicine on a daily basis, this is the way that we rely on the medicine, or we rely on the Dharma in order to counteract those suffering results.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the go Kashoda. There is some time in Alia, Mesa on a shingy. Neson to me, Kakseta, Boxeta. And then Koyaki and Goet and Dalia, Mayani and the South, the Samiani and the Tango from the other. Oh, the man, the Yabo, Yiri sometimes the Madame Yina, and then Hakona, the man, the Tango, the Natural Hakona, man, myself situation, and it's so to think about. It thing is getting done at Sogua. So none never did none community book, Nasa to me Magunya. And Tanda go to me Yajate, but echoes to me Magunya gives it. I could never care what it's on some. Nasa to try to that. Never care what says, Shima could never care what she or never dig out. I can collect say. So I need to connect men to stay. Nasa de Tire. Nasa you did it. I can amend this out with this. May get simple candle simple yoga. Teacher. Teacher, that's also a delay. That made my service. Yiri Saku, the Pamasavina, and Colping Mare Soda. In Mangi Mare, member Mare, member Zen, which and member Rade, member Nehako, the man Terre. That's also Masavina. I'm taking him and I said him out okay, Moumbana, Sosulia. And do young battle. Oh, the so young and near message as some tabo. Kim has a shash and also Kim and Becca Mare, Maggie Mare, so or the community something to be checked.
So thinking like that, we should be thinking like on a daily basis, we need to take these medicines in order to stop the sufferings of the lower realms and in order to avert the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, repeated rebirth within samsara. And this is something where, like with any medicine, we have to take it again and again on a regular basis. And we need to think about this again and again, these sufferings, as well as the sort of antidote to that. The medicine is thinking about that repeatedly on a daily basis. And so if you don't do it like that, if you don't really take the medicine by really contemplating these points, it's as it is said in the King of Concentration Sutra. Like if you have a sick person who has been sick for a long time and say they are able to go find a very qualified doctor, and that doctor, out of their compassion, gives them very powerful and effective medicine, but in turn that person then doesn't take the medicine, you can't point to the doctor being at fault. You can't point to the medicine being at fault. It's the person's own fault because they haven't taken that medicine. So here, even if you have sought out like a powerful doctor who has these efficacious medicines, if you don't take them, then it's really your own fault that you don't benefit from them. So here, when it comes to thinking about the sort of antidotes to our sufferings of the lower realms and of samsara, these are things that we need to contemplate again and again. We can't just sort of set it aside and think like, oh, I know that, and think that we are taking the medicine. Taking the medicine is this repeated contemplation.
Oh yeah, Sunday, Sunday, I think it's given to Sunday. Yeah, Rabu Sunday, share gas. Oh, yeah, to me, to me again, Rabu Sunday, share, yes, only to me, correct to me, to share, member of me, Sabu, see, Abu Yen Rabu Sunday, share gas. Trade turn a yanda mazena, what you run the Hako Sene, or that to me was you did the some Yiri Samutan, Shemazeli, Nasura. Yen Rabu Sunday, share, trade turn a yanda mazena, shed the mazena, share. Never made it, never talk about that, and then a sort of ministry. And never they call Nagis, remember the man, remember the man, come master set. The man they call Jola, Louis, and Jola, Kataka, Tobucha. This child, any, I said, I haven't made from this. Never made it, never talk. I made the name myself, the size, made the Nikivan nation, Mamuchi Sachi, Jolana, Fancy Sasha, Again, so ammunition, never nation, so much at the time, break and you my rescue door. Or they didn't mention area. Men 7 9 then go to education, so
So here it is, as the Buddha has explained within the King of Concentration Sutra. So he says that although I've taught this like pure Dharma, this Dharma that has the power to protect you from these sufferings, if you don't properly rely on that by actually putting it into practice, if you don't do this correctly, then it's like a sick person who has gone, sought out a doctor and gotten the best medicine, but just doesn't take it. It's not possible for this just to change you if you don't actually take the medicine. So like a sick person who say knows that they have an illness and they go and they seek out the best doctor, but they just keep getting the medicine and like putting it in their bag and never taking it, then they're not going to be cured from that illness. And so when it comes to the sufferings of the lower realms and the sufferings of samsara, we have to take the medicine against that, which means relying on the Dharma by actually contemplating those faults and how it is that you prevent them. There's no way that just by the Buddha teaching, you can get rid of those sufferings. Rather, you have to take this medicine or implement the Dharma.
Oh yeah, that Rani Quad and Yasumi Tungele Chiga Tarbasha. Oh, the Ratsibu Quad and Yasumi Tungele Tarasa Marimba. Rala Kinship Suggestion Daja. Quad and Yasumi Tungele, Tungenge, Joala Rovachi Tungenge, Ani kyo se yende kunde langdor ginne tamje shenge sanje je koba tobar sha. Te she to te tamje ge kyo. Ani mondo lami koba tamje ge kyo. Taba da tamje kimbo tamje ge tembe. Ani shete nyenge yensam kuno se tamne sabar shuosha.
So, not just thinking of one's own freedom from the sufferings of samsara and the lower realms, but also recognizing that these beings who have shown you great kindness are stuck in this suffering kind of situation. And so, with the thought to be able to attain that state of Buddhahood, wherein you have removed all faults and perfected all good qualities, and know all of the points which are to be adopted and to be abandoned, this is what one is striving after in order to be able to benefit those other sentient beings. So right now, while we have this precious human rebirth, we should we should make it meaningful. Here, listening to the Dharma with that kind of motivation to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings.
Oh yeah. Shibya, Gachu Yimba, Shibya Gachu, Omega. Niban Joan Bashile Kawa Kabala Nis, Shesi Tambala Charo Tanse. Joan, Luigi Sopana Yeben Joan, Konala Tene, Kondo Tanga Jeda, Tadola Soba, Tuxo with the Kigre, Tiki Maresi Guada, Joan Bashile Kawa Kabala Nis, Shesi Tambala Charota, Tanda Kondo Shesare. Ne sumla tene, ane, kasi doja sheta temu sumbu de tigre ese, sheba na sheti mare se ralu kacharwa, na sumbu de muju chene, ane nyamo sumbu de kiwa de kachare, chena shesi tambala chawati, so se chantuba chigore sungora. Lu sam jiten kebar chayimba, lu sam jiten kebar chayimba, bobo riba shen tambas, so de, lui de sem de ten kebar chemba lui de le sem de ten de yore de ten kebar chamare lui le ten de yore kondo nga je chado samlo koran che de so go ne da le ten de to chi yore na za sumle ten de to chi yore chida ina ko mi ju che te kyang kyang ju mare su yore o te de za ko de ya lui sem de ten kebar chemba go lui de Semlia Juchigre, Kondo Kiwata, Nemo Kiwala, Juchigare, in a ten Keverja Mare, Ludi Janjang, Jumamato, Shenda, Jumava Mare. So the Koran Kombe Wangi, Jawangama Komba, and it is Sabin de Nibadia, Niju, Sosuke, Samutanga, Nepal, Teletene, Yungi or Mato, Chi joined Janjantene, Yungi or Maresti, Shell, Tambaniche. Any thought on Buddha, Shesi Tambala Charotera, Shesi Tambala Charo said, oh, Tambuni didn't enjoy Chunika, Tenaka, Panichero, Savatera, didn't enjoy Chunika, oh, Chaso Nesumji, Chita Naza Sumlatenico, Chabada, Kondoda, Timuki, Chuchira, Chuchiva Yunguare, Inako, Tichibuki Chuchaniki Marwa. Ko chakso ne somji ngode yimba gobe rikban de nese chakso de ne somji ngode debu yimba de ma do kyushen me go ba de sanani do sande yimba yimba gobe rikban de ne cheje chakso joye ngode ji cheni yimba ya ka de la cheso do do truwe de ja sheda timu sombo de ne somji ngode are Ikasare inse. Tanashi Lu Tobana even Joanchi would take you Mares or take in Sungora. Chason Joan would get trained by a card, till a chase on the trees. Sabina joined the yoga some day, and it's Condodanga get a type of giving a bucket of Mare, chase on the dog in Jawa to Mare. Judan debut in Jawa to Mare, Judy Yona. Man and David make you attend the Maris Sungora. Junshi Chaso Trupse, never ten Mahinde, or Tibato Chilamna, yeah.
No.
Oh dear.
So here then, where we are picking up in the text is on page 362 with the section Suffering and the Elements. So here, under the point of refuting the idea that suffering arises only from the elements, this is divided into 2 points. First of those being giving a reminder of what has already been explained. And so here, this body of ours, which is a collection of the elements, we're going to be refuting that is the basis or the cause of our afflictions. So as it was already explained above, when we were refuting the idea that the afflictions are attachment and aversion and ignorance arise from the 3 humors, that has already been refuted. And so the first point is giving a reminder of what has already been explained. And then second is showing other reasons that refute the idea that the body is the special basis of mind. So the body is not the special indispensable basis of mind. We can say that the body is a basis for our experiences of various afflictive emotions. Like we can have something happen to our body that then acts as a cause for our getting angry. But the main cause and the special indispensable cause is mainly due to previous habituation, previously habituating to those afflictive emotions rather than some kind of external elements that are acting as a cause. So here in the verse, the root verse, it says, this also refutes the idea that the defilements have the nature of the elements. Also, those elements are not the basis of defilements because that they are has been refuted. So this is similar to what came above in that this reasoning refutes the idea that attachment, etc., are the direct result of the 3 humors. Also refutes the idea that attachment and so forth have the nature of being the direct result of the elements, because it is proven in that in the latter case, the assertion of positive and negative concomitants is mistaken. So here, again, we see that the elements, similar to the argument that was presented with regard to the humors, are not the direct cause. They aren't something where if you have if this is present, then that will occur. So we don't have that kind of relationship between the elements and our defilements, our attachment and hatred and delusion and so forth. So there isn't that sort of relationship of positive and negative concomitants. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And John she also to never Lady Topana Sajum John Station. And also the church is not the Muslim with the troops are never see the Tayamares. Troops in never ten says you are Kojuda can't in the case are in the Koran case. Troops are the young age of your mother. Troops in never see the Tayamares. No, troops never Tayamade, Taya, you made all the Temisha, Shiba Kasukas, the Talia Casa. Troops somebody never think of Mare Cote, Koran troops are the troops are the Congo Negio, the Anesic Juice Loga, Tenda Yomares and Yoda. You made all the Temisha. Yeah, Tenetasim, or this is Lana, yeah.
So then continuing with the second line of that, it says then, it is also not the case that those 4 elements are the basis of the abiding of an already existent attachment, etc., because that has already been refuted, where it says, whether substances are existent or non-existent, there is no basis substantially different from them. So again, this idea of causality, if something is already abiding, it can't be the cause. It can't be the result of something. So if things are acting in a cause and result relationship, they can't be abiding at the same time. So here where it says that they're acting as the basis, that has already been refuted, because again, the elements and the attachment and so forth are existing at the same time, or abiding at the same time. So something already established and simultaneously existing isn't existing in a cause and effect relationship.
No, that day, ne somebody Casadocha said that Timuson Bimu to Chigre Sada. Only do the Sobana Yeva Joan to Chibuki, and then Yamokia, some care, you Chigre Sada, Tambin by Yora, Joanna. Umjigi Wagitanda, Kondunga Jella Sobachi, but the Camelin get his own share. His own share the Pakayona. Joangame combatant in the Shebangama Tugimarese. So which I said the Tene, and then Nazar, so good Nazada, and then so good Sobana Benjoa, or Tozugia, Kondunga Jetta, some decay or a stitch with Julie Shaviora. What did they say at Tandaka day?
No.
What is this one? Yeah.
No. So here, what is being refuted is the idea that it is only based upon like the elements of the body that our afflictions arise, our attachment and hatred and ignorance arise only from the elements or only from the humors, like sickness within us. So here, the kind of view that is being refuted is that of the Charvakas who think that there are no past and future lives. And so they explain that the body, when the body is established, the mind must come from that. And so all of our afflictions, things like anger, can't come from previous consciousnesses not in this life. Therefore, it has to be the elements within the collection of the body or the sicknesses that the body experiences that cause the arising of the afflictions. And so the kind of view that is being refuted is that of this sort of view, that a materialist, or that there's only the elements, only the physical elements lead to our various afflictions.
No, then much a little so we saw what Nasara saw what is Wangi, Yamokia, some of Koyale, Chabata do it. Teaching with you, my race, so good, Rangi Rindangama, Condor Kilamata, Mango Condor Senate, Tis, some give to never your echo. Tia mean to design it, I give you a Rindangama, ten Kevora, Semina, Sem Korang, Rinda, Kungamachi, Kevora, Condor in a Condongama, Sigi Pasha, Teleten Kevora. Namachan Conto Sama Yungashi Conto Sayasi or Marco. Tijuko, Mame Range, Semina, Semame Rindaletene. Yamoina Rinde Pasha, Rinda Namaltene, Kebu, Lucy Gutu Modesty to Biora. Oh, this one.
So the collection of the elements of the body or the various humors within them are here being refuted as the cause of our various afflictions. Instead, it's not saying that they can't act as like a contributing cause to our giving rise to a particular affliction, but those must come from a cause of a similar type. So they have to come from previous causes that are mental in the first place. And like for anger, for example, you couldn't give rise to anger if you'd never had anger before. It's rather those imprints that are left upon consciousness, those causes of a previous type that lead to the arising of those types of mind. You can't posit the physical elements as the sole cause of the arising of the afflictions.
Oh, yeah. This one?
Dixon.
Oh, yeah. Daniba, Lucian getting Keversian go where Zuba Shantan Balani Siba. Lu Sim getting Keverjamara, then some children, do some children. Then Keverjan. Lu de Mana, Sim de Kemetunga, Lu de Chicoletan, Sim Ketunga, Condu Ketunga, I get to get in the Mares. Then Keverjan, then Keverjan. Millennium, then Keverjan.
Millennium, no.
When you thank you about it, Tagi Keverjan, and a Miwa, Miki Wambuti, Mixi, thank you about it, Kunyele Marda Tagirva. So could Miwa man and Mixi Yoma Rakaduina. Miwa de Mixi, thank you about it. Yele dan Tagi Keverjina, and thank you about it. Do some Jebalea, thank you about it. Thank you about it. Yana Yele Jazz could Yundi Akibura. Kaduina to the Manako, Deputy Metum Gescora. Tanda Ludi Kona, Ludi Mana Namia, Shebe June Metuba that in the Rayomara. So the Sheba Nami accumulated the Kona Kona Kuchin Dote Yorno. Oh, yeah.
Oh. So here, then turning to the next topic, it is showing other reasons that refute the idea that the body is the special basis of mind. Now, we can say that the body is a cause of mind, or it's a basis for mind, but the body is not the special basis of mind, meaning that it is not solely based upon the body that mind can come into existence. So here, when we talk about different types of causes, there's one called, it's usually translated as the substantial cause. And so if something is the substantial cause, then it's a special basis. So mind has to have a previous moment of mind, a previous continuum of consciousness in order to give rise to another moment of mind. In the same way, you can think about like our visual consciousness that has as its basis the visual sense power. If we don't have that visual sense power, then you can't have a visual consciousness. And so that's in a case of there being a special a special basis. But in the case of mind, this special basis of mind cannot be the body, in that this can't be the substantial cause that leads to mind. It has to come from a continuum of consciousness.
Listen, the ten cabins in Bangobe, River Shantan, but the pick up at the tank of a niche, that pick up at the shake water. Church Jungur, John, Temper Kelamba, Jungur said that Kaji Chu Love to a pay love to. Oh, can be but that is so pay love the other. Can Nambasanja Vacharaki, Jungur, Sachu Melon, Jungur, Kato, the Yip, Tina Rollers over Tezosera, Jungur, Joanna Temper. Sure, me long in John Shilatene, Jungu to Teletene, Kela to Asagora. Jungu, Jumana Temper Kelan Bashendo, Chansoja in the Ese, Chansola of the same to John Shilatene, Luigi, John Shilatene, Kiki or the Chiba de Esagora. Shandona Kerala cannot get to a Shandona Kerala Gavai Gure, and then Jungu Kanga, Joanna Tene, Kiki or any Samuel to the Kanga. Luigi Sopana and Joanna Tene Mediation and Madire, Tene Carol Tene Kigres and Gayan Guru Sambiora. She asked to land. That don't look pa land of your dog. Duro Shena Asa. Carbo loss of the Jungur churches. Jungur to Joanna Tengere, such Carbo da, Kato da, Yipda, Tita, Roda, Rezalas over Teso, Jungur Sigra, such you may Joan Sigora. Sai Carbola Soba Jungur Church, Ke Sasso Joanna, to send never suit the temple in the mind. Carbo de troops are a share, and the young Nazi Juche and never tend to Maresura. Sai Joanna Desoge, Carbo Juchira, Chima de Juchira, Nama Chima, Nama Juchira. Tanda you the carbon to them to your carbon. So much good mother could to sin never dancing mother. Troops in but the young never see the tension of Kogu mother. The to sin never temper in the mind, cute to say in the oh, then is Sai Carbolus of a Sada to say in the Sawase. Kedenta, and it today in an dog Sudan today, and Junju and Joanna Temperese. Today, some good article as an Nasigora. Tell a temper saber, try to answer. Tunim Soba Chipala, 10 to Tabana. Such a Joan she, Tobana, Yungenge, Carboda, Chita, Rollers of Batezukanga, called Tunyam to Nyamdo user. Yana Ragi 10 that I am a banana, 10 years. Could no image and the code net user tell a dance, shake your race. That and that. Yana Joanamage, Jungi, Jucheval, 10 sugar. Yana Tanda Soba Chip was in there, you did. There's some like temper race, shake your race. Tell a temper saber, try to Tunyam Soba Chip, but attend to Tawasam. Yamdo saw the user could detain race, Tawasam race. Yana Gama Kebe Kone, Yana Joan Lama to Juju Chima to Keba, Sugara, Sai Amadege, Sachimagangi, Sai Carbola, Soba, China, Rola, Soba, Chigra. Quebec on est un de Tamba Indi, Telesha to see never tend to Taba, Taba Maiberta, Joaname, Juitonam Yana, Tunim Soba, Yemeba never said, Rangi tend to Tabas and that's what it is. That Sai Carbola Soba, that Sangamate, and it to send the Tigre. Tanda tunyam to so de sai junga de sai carbolia temba se sheba sambe soba chiwa sambe temba se sheba sambe is
No.
no ya
Yudre ngune mare. Seni zangwa mare.
tanda tunyam to yeba sai carbo de sai sal temba ngone de mare sambe wara sai ngama mal tene ko chima de kiri wara tanda temba soba nyam do is tele temba re se sheba sambe mato two simba de never take ko mare sambe wara.
So here, then, for that point of refuting, showing other reasons that refute the idea that the body is the special basis of mind, is divided into refuting the example and refuting the meaning. So refuting the example comes here with the opponent first beginning by saying whiteness, etc., are not based upon earth and other elements. And so here, the opponent actually, they present this before the verse. So the opponent here then says, just as you accept that secondary qualities are based upon the elements, so must you accept that attachment is based upon the elements. Otherwise, there will be a contradiction in what you accept. So here, when we have the elements, those are things like earth, wind, fire, and water, but secondary elements, which actually sort of in the Tibetan has this sense of like transformed elements. These are things like the taste and color and shape and so forth. So in the way this opponent is thinking that just in the way that you accept that secondary qualities are based upon the elements, so too must you accept that attachment is based upon the elements. Otherwise, there's a contradiction in what you say. And so the reply to that then comes in these verses. So it says that whiteness, etc., are not based upon earth and other elements, because the phrase based upon those means cause, or alternatively, that whiteness's own bases abide inseparably. Something else cannot be accepted as its basis. And so here in the commentary, Gyaltsab Je explains that the secondary qualities of whiteness and so forth are not based on earth and other already existent and abiding elements, because they are objectively separate from the elements. So you can objectively separate white from the element of earth, for example. And so you can't say that they are like based upon in the sense of something that is already existent and abiding. And it also it follows that the meaning of the phrase explained as based upon those elements is that a single simultaneous collection, what abides together, is merely designated as the basis. It is taught as the basis by way of its previous generation, something substantially other than other that already exists and abides with it cannot be accepted as the real basis, because either the previous elements are meant as the cooperative cause, or alternatively, if the elements are simultaneous, they are merely designated as whiteness's own bases because they abide inseparably in a single simultaneous collection. So here, basically, what is being said here is that these secondary elements are not based upon in the sense of a kind of causality that earth is the cause of whiteness, for example, because they already exist as substantially different things. It's merely sort of in speaking about it that we can impute this basis, say earth, as being the basis for the base thing, whiteness, but it's not actually a case of there being a cause and effect relationship, because they abide inseparably within a single simultaneous collection. Although it's not that they are substantially the same, they are something that cannot be described as cause and effect, because the cause of another moment of an earth's whiteness has to be based upon a previous moment of that same earth. So there's not a sense that there's the previous moment of earth causes the whiteness in that sense.
Oh yeah. Dandy Odelia Kaji Sido. Gede Changdang Yuban Nubala Soba Denshengi Tenda Temba Invitation Dosiba Changdang Changi Rashi Yorwa
No.
Rashi Yeba Ara Tonani Rashi Dura Godisu Changdang Changi Nuban Nuba Ase Gede Changdang Changi Nuban Nuba Nuba La Soba Denshengi Tenda Invitation Dosa Kuni ngo tadere, tanda ngo shenre, ten tembare sigora, chanda changi nyebe neba, ten tembare yuna ngo tadere sigora. Ralu chena ngo tade mara ngo chigwa yore, chanda changi nyebe neba di ngo chigwa re. Yuna koran ngo tadere sigora. Chanda changi nyebe neba la soba, ten shenji ten temba yimba de shendo chakso jan, juwa la se, o tenan shen, kondro nga je dan semde, Luigi Sobana Yube, Juang Dan Tension Betten Barese. Kuni Kagata, Yinako, Luigi Sobana Yube, Jual Tenico, Jago Yorese, Chanda Changan never nation, Kuni, Mo Kaga, Kaga de, tell Tengit, Tinashi, Luigi Sobana Yube, Jual Teni, Kondunga Yellow Soba, Semper, Yi Shiva to Ski Yorese, this is law. Then that Demba. Chaso jan jungjul la yeri ki chu de temba inose ngo thade se ko tengire se yana se soba yer me ba sam de tenda temba me jur de se chanda de ne ba yeri ki de o soba yer me chi na so de yona ya ne ngo chi ba yin ko ma de se chanda de ne ba ni bu de nyam do so de yor de Kuli ngo tadere yeri ki tenda temba ino shenaase kaji sula bidwa kaji bebatere o teji so ya.
So here, then continuing again with the opponent's kind of view, going back to the root verses, it says that if you say that it is just like the capacity to intoxicate, etc., which are, and there's actually a typo here, it should be separable from liquor. So in this case, the opponent is trying to say that liquor, like beer or alcohol, something that can give rise to a power to intoxicate, that substance, that alcohol, and its capacity to intoxicate are objectively separate things, basis and based. And so too, attachment, etc., are based on separately existing elements. So they would argue in this case that in the same way, and here they are arguing that the capacity to intoxicate is objectively separable from liquor, whereas we would say that actually it's not separable. They don't have some kind of a separate nature. You can't separate those out. But here the opponent is arguing that our afflictions arise from the elements, similar to the kind of relationship they see of basis and based with liquor and its capacity to intoxicate. Or alternatively, there can be no basis and based where there is only an inseparable collection. Liquor and its intoxicating power are a basis that exists separately. So here they're basically trying to say that they are they have like a separate natures. So in the case of liquor and its capacity to intoxicate, those are things that are separable. We can say they are basis and based, and so too are the elements. The basis of are then afflictions, which are the based thing. This is what the opponent is trying to argue.
Oh yeah. That's how they get the news on the Geshe Yeshe Thabkhe and the Kaji Devadera, Chanda Changa Nebe Nebashindu, and then Luta Semibutia, Mota de Yeri attended them by Yinsi Lapswa. Taran Lupa, Mobile never to send in my answer, or Changi Mobile, they never did, no Tade Mares, Zeta de Mares, my Bartas, never to send in my answer. Chanda Changa Nebe never nebude, don't send Mares, Kaji don't say this or don't send my Barta, can you to this in basis? When you kill a kid and Yam to Jigger and Netu Yam to Negre and Jiggin Yam to Jigger, to this is a Kuda Galati, Kuda Chipashan, Netu Chipane, Jidu Yam to Jig, we are no. To this in basis. Cuba should do Tambu to be this, never to be a Tambu Kuda, Sema never, Yam to Sanavia, to this is in basis. Did that mean answer? That catches you, the woman did that mean answer? Oh, Chanda Changa knew when you would more than the main answer, or did that mean answer? Chang knew about Chang Sour Gibbet, Chang Sabus in the Alcona, Rassi and Melchaguara, knew when you were Melchaguara. Did that mean that Chang Sour Gibbet say, Changing over and Jigger Euratas? Only Changing over the Jigger, Changing knew when you were the Mel. That means some sour you say, chunking over Jibber Eurota, they never GBHs, more Jibayina, any chance I was on the chunky, rather than never do your mar, any chunk they do, couldn't more Jibay Nasura. They chunk sour and they chunk sour and Nana, then by new and never Jibba de Logwa, Maiba Talos, the Kaji to Kenchigua. That I look about. Let me say, came into the Mochiba Inaya, Kotuta to Mochiba Ingo Marwa, then I read the car with the Mochiba. That's so just read the car with the Mochiba Mariama with the Mochiba Sorva, which is on Koti Chang did that Chang and never Jesse the red, in a co Chang Samson question, Chara and never Melchagra, you go more Melchara. The Mochiba in a Tawarisco, Chidian, Chidio, Yomaro. Red, red, car when you would say Chibara, Mochibara. In a red, so Jalsonaya, Marwota, Mochibare, Dura. Tindina, Mindu, the lane, Jamna, Jaira. Oh, yeah.
Oh. So then the response to that from Gyaltsab J is that he says then the capacity to intoxicate is not objectively separate from the liquor entity. So it follows that the capacity to intoxicate is not objectively separate from the liquor entity because those two exist as substantially identical. So in the case of something that exists as substantially identical, this means that they have the same causes for coming about. The cause that leads to alcohol is leading to, it causes the power to intoxicate, and they as long as there is the alcohol is remaining, that power to intoxicate will remain, and when it is destroyed, that will be destroyed, and so forth. So in that way they exist as substantially identical. So he continues then saying that since that is the case, it follows that when liquor is heated, the liquor entity is destroyed because its capacity to to intoxicate has been destroyed. So when the basis, the liquor, remains hot, it follows that the base, the capacity to intoxicate, will be destroyed and will not return. So here, there's actually, you could see this as being an objection by the opponent that, well, if you are to say heat up alcohol, you boil it, the power to intoxicate is gone, but that liquid still remains. Now you could argue that then the liquor is actually gone, that it goes with the power to intoxicate. But even so, we can think about something like a white cloth. Although when that cloth is white, the whiteness and the cloth are of the same nature, they're the same substantial thing. Say you were to dye that cloth, the nature of it could change such that now the cloth is a different color. And you can have the same sort of thing happen in the case of like liquor and its capacity to intoxicate. But here they would argue that those two are actually substantially identical.
Oh yeah, different.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's in the then gosh. Get it is soon she na se min said ra. Get it changdang yue ben nuba changdang yue ben nuba you would zeta de invitation. Juanda sim you would ya and then lady toba no Juanda sim you would zeta de song so in the tongue mares and legend. Now Tade said of Junsim Tade Yeshiro. Lady toba no even Juanda. Then sim you would zeta de res yora. Yaraside, Musumla sources of Kaka Nangaduas or Nama Tadeshan Thomas. Sumba member than Junsim Zeta de Ni Rese. Chanda Changa Newman, you will get Zeta de Marese. Territarse. Loma Trua, Nama Tadeshan to Thomas. Juan Sam Yibute, Loma Trua, Musumbi, the sources of Kaka Video, Resungora. Juan de Rexena Bashan, Sai Juan, so we regna Hakueta. Ongbe Lushig Shingetera, Juan Gen. Choa Simbe Namba Simbe, Chora Sidizako, Social Assembly, Simber Nuas, the Dar Nua de Sigora, Nua Namba Eco Rexanation, Lushig Hakongit de Omarwa. Do not think Kaladeso. Choa Simbe Namba Simbe Naishos.
No. So here, the opponent continues to insist that the elements and the mind are substantially different in the same way as liquor and its intoxicating power. So they still want to say that mind arises from the elements in the same way that intoxicating power comes from liquor, but that they are somehow substantially different. And so then the response to this comes with the last part of this verse, where it says then, if you say that the elements and mind equally are substantially identical, we reply it is not the same, because the elements and mind are different since they are cognized as having different appearances. So the opponent would say here that there's some sort of substantial difference, but they're the same, or sorry, here, saying that they're substantially different, but it's like liquor and the intoxicating power. And here again, the response is that it follows that the cases are not the same because the elements and mind are substantially different. This follows because they are cognized by an unmistaken mind as having different appearances, because they appear respectively as having the aspect of a tangible element and having the aspect of a pleasant sensation and so forth. So here, it's not the case that the mind and the elements are somehow the same, because they can be they appear as different to an unmistaken mind. So we can recognize that the elements, physical elements, have this tangible nature, whereas when it comes to mental experience, such as pleasant sensation and so forth, that has an experiential, a mental aspect, which is distinct from this kind of tangible element of the elements.
This one,
This one.
Moya. That did that. Even Tanka was the Lucien, the Tank Cabers and Beteka, but the Tanka was even that Lucid simply Tank Cabers and Marais and that company shadow. Odicas Nechi Lucien to Gurgi Pato, Yellow Togo, number Funga, Duratasa. She said the Luz, she can do in a Luz, you want the condition and Tinashi, there were enough. Any yellow talk about there, they don't so much as what you can say there with this or yellow talk about no number, somebody give a answer. They talk about answers, yellow talk about it, talk about Wilson Mara, talk about it. Oh, yellow talk about it, they talk about answer, tell her, Tajin Cabers and Jacone, 10 bears. Luigi Juan de Tajin Cabers and Chigu, Sigora. Me want to make sure that Tajin Cabers and Sigora, Tinashi. Any Luigi Juan de Yi Sheba, Tajin Cabers and Chiguna Sigora. Sita Lu Shanto Jurgi Pardo, Lu de Shanto Jurgi Pardo, Tambo, some look at the Kurgo in a tenancy, the day of the Severa. You look of them all number Sumba, number Karisha, no Karin Zegina, tenancy there of this or Urata. The talk about Kashi tell a Tajin Cabers and Jacone, then bases, Ralu Pasiora. So Junjun Jume says so 27 Shinos. Sola Soban Juan does pay out and Dibachiza, Junju, Suso Juan de Jodu, Junju de Chess 26. What did I say? Lud de Lewa Ludi Chassis, Easy Sheba de Tajin Chigina, any dinashing Yoko Grace of the door. She knows whatever the Chiguna.
So then that finishes the section on refuting the example of the body being the special basis of mind. And here we're going to then refute the meaning. So this comes in the next section. So it begins with, if the body and mind are basis and based, then until the body is transformed, the nature of the mind will be the same, like form and so forth. So here, as it follows by your view, if the body is the special basis, the special principal condition or the special basis of mind, that until the body is transformed, the nature of mind will be the same in aspect, because any mind is based on body as its special principal condition. So like when we talk about a special principal condition of mental, like a visual sense power acting as the special principal condition for visual consciousness and so forth, they here are arguing that the elements of the body are acting as that special principal condition for mind. So if it were the case, then mind then is just like the secondary qualities of form and so forth, which increase and decrease following on the elements. And so if it were the case that the body acted as the special principal condition of mind, then the increase or decrease of the elements would lead to changes within the mind. And that would be the kind of relationship that it would have with the body.
Oh, yeah. That I lose it. Making you want to shadow Jura, you know, and all catches you are. You join the condition never take it against you look about you are there. You know, you join the Kazet Devon National number than some of the Chimachi there to Bares. Carson making you connection with you. Making the you do the Nico you do Gares and Asiora. Oh, making you go Making you want to number send to Jura, you know, Senase, or they take Maresa. Talk about making your Maresora. Nusum Yanko, Tajin, Miwache, making Su, Tentacuyora, Tanzania, and making Tadava, Tadi condition travel in a Tinashin Togura, make a cut in a making and take condition at Tinashin Togura. And then the yellow talk about it, tell him making your mother. College now then get the Tunji said there are Tunji. Really, you are somebody should not take you. And then the talk about your Koran now is search in my tongue, they get now search, did not take you. Sakoti Miki Yomare Tobalsura. Miki Connection to Juarasana Yulu Tobade, Condanga Yellow Sobatezo, Juachipa Yinachipa Nashi Kalsanki de Judus, not Tobal making Maresura, Musunashi. The number of what says Sundin Kone, Shani Kane, and Mitabatasa, Sundin the Miki Chibara, Sundin Kone, Nitambunashi Mother, she called Yuduade, take Maresura. Sundin Shawan Yi Kane, Sundin Shangi, Sundin Shangi, one can call Juado Resonate, take Maresa. Kane Mitabata, Tunji now some Church. Talk about the Tunji song you do chigre, no some does a Ramsen song you do chigre, no Ramsen one yet. Talk about the Tunji Korang, somebody actually chat there, no Mare, Ramsen Mare. Kokadina could the Chayavara. Nima Kambachi Nalako, Shendon Chiana, Kotanda Samatana, the Kambate, the Ragoki, the Shendon Chi, some Nangiri Kadu in a Chiba Nangiri. Because Shendon Munia, Yana Menake, Omar, Shendon Chesari in a Kotanda Samatana, or Tele Shendon Chi, some good one. So the Tobalia could be social now the artist, social social Nazi or mother, Ransen Shendon Munia de Mare. Musumina thought that the Shendon Munia. The Shindu, the Shimpa chairs, Mabs, and Nakunamsa now, Mabs. Or this is done. Oh, the number of what you just do, you connection to you and the color in the Maimberta. Tuji now some Yesheba in Misut, and then loosen the 10 chambers and Miroa, Kangache, Lula Toba Meber, Shivangama Gashi, Lechimangashi Joa Inde, Della Toba Meber, Shivangama Gashi, Simangashi, or Chasa Joa Bishop. Or the Yigisheba Kondo Nanga Jela Sobatezukanga, Miki Koneke Maris, Shebangama, Kondo Nanga Jela, the Degisha, Pasha, never the minute you said any Kondo Jela Sobatezuk, what did I do?
So here, then, the opponent comes back by saying that, well, mind's aspect is transformed by the power of an objective condition. So as a sort of refutation or a response to, well, the mind wouldn't transform until the elements of the body transform, they say, well, no, mind's transformation is due to the power of an objective condition. And so here, it says then in the root verses, like form, etc., conceptual thought is under the control of some object. Then it continues. I'll just read the commentary actually for this. The root verse will come within it. So here it follows that it cannot in any way be accepted that conceptual thought is under the control of some external object, because it arises through the appearance of a mere generic image. So here, when it comes to our mental consciousness, we don't need to have some kind of an external objective condition. So when it comes to the arising of our sense consciousnesses, we have the sort of empowering condition of that particular sense power. And then the previous moment of a sense consciousness, which is the substantial cause or the condition. And then you have the objective condition, like say for in oral consciousness, you're going to hear a sound, and that sound, that external sound acts as an objective condition where you have the empowering condition of that ear sense power. And then the previous moment of ear sense consciousness, you're able to have a consciousness of the ear of the sound. Now, when it comes to our mind, however, though, it doesn't need, a mental consciousness does not need that objective condition. It can arise through the arising of a generic image. So say, for instance, we have an image in our mind of a tree. We can call up that image of a tree without having the need for that external tree. If you're directly perceiving that tree, at least in this system, they would say that the sort of special character, the Ran Center, the own characteristics of that object are appearing to a direct perception. And so that here, what it is being refuted is that this is an objective condition is this kind of special basis. So It continues by saying that thus body and mind are unsuitable to be special basis and based. Any later cognition originates from some previous cognition without ever depending upon the body made of elements, because without ever depending upon it, some subsequent cognition thus will have as its cause the awakening of the propensity left by some previous cognition. So here it's getting at the cause of a cognition is a previous moment of cognition. It's not an external object that or the body that it has to depend upon.
Oh yeah. Then Toma Yuba Kabala Nisudwa, Kuala Toma Yuba Kabala, and the Tama to Kuala Toma never to be a suppose easy Toba Kondunga Jeta Tola Sobatezo, Koran the Timu Maimbe Yelengi Ju, Kondungama Jigip Shabre Pasha, Shibangama Namaka Kombe, one Chimachima Yumbi Adese, Titubura, so good Jointanga Kigmade, Lungi Pagan, some Butanga Mare, Koran Timu Maimbe Ju. Shiba Ngama Ngama Pasha, several ten, Keguri Siduni, Pasha di Tomiri, Shiba Ngama Tingama Shiba Koti, Shiba Kodi, Nicola Toma Mevade, Shiba Toma Machagua. Tezuto to Biara, Jambe Badazoti, Marikaduda, so good Nazar than Joalitan Kevaris and Biara, or Timares, Kotumu might be you, Jingama de Core, Yene Core, or Titu Gudua. And what teach you, Lana?
No. So then we will be turning to the idea, refuting the idea that samsara has a beginning. And this is following again, the previous section was on proving that samsara is beginningless. So here, this is establishing that our various afflictions must arise from some previous moment of cognition. Their uncommon kind of substantial cause are those propensities laid down on consciousness. They have to come from a cause of a similar type. And so this then refutes that there could be some kind of beginning to this. There's a beginningless continuum of consciousness and these imprints upon consciousness. And that is the kind of substantial cause that leads to the various afflictions. And so this then is going to, that has established then that samsara is beginningless, that this, our various afflictions and our consciousness itself needs to arise from a previous moment of consciousness as a substantial cause. And so now it's going to turn to refuting the idea that samsara has a beginning, like some of those Charvakas and so forth who would assert that there's that life just begins at conception and consciousness as well.
Oh yeah, then you were Toma Yuba, Koala Toma Yuba Kapa de la Nindua. Young people to call Toma Yoda Tango, whereas the Mikation Toma de Titali or Marisura. The Koala Toma Yuba, Capsi Mami Betaji Kava, Capsi Mami. Gajem me Betagi Kava, singing the water. Tatambo Koala Toma Yuba. Chapsi Mami Betagi Guas, a task of Yora, or the Carasana. Namsi member, Namsi Pinjane, member Chile and Dupset, Sawadera. Take I should have said, Pa Shangi Jankoala Toma Baba Dupte Suda, Simjan Arme, Sadu Kiva maybe answer. Call Yangar, call a Mangangi, call my new guest, Sabasajansi, Kia Yoma Resura. Simjan Arme, Sadu Kiva, maybe answer. Simjanji Kuala Kiva, United Mako Shandaji, Shandaji, Mother, Narzani, Mavaji, Jumalitan, Simjan Savasajanji, Kia Yoma Resigura, Kiva Yoma Resa. Simjan Army started to give a ring maybe. They made the Namsi member Namsi, Yenin de Miron Esser. Shiba Yenin de la Shiba Red Rungagi Judelia, Shiba Chikubiota. Majo Sobo Reagi Judelia, Hame Kutala Soba Tezu, Tutuzuge. Nanti sobo tu biara. Sheba de tutu tuba mare. Sheba nyele de le tugi chigine. Sheba de kado yenge, yibi yenge, sobda yenge tendesi yokura ti yo mare. Shebe gyun de le yako nyele gi gyun de le kora da ring dawa, ring tuba chikora. Nanti kaso shebe resitap sunoko katsabu yenge gi ring si sabin chitakurwa. Namurajin Namu Gacy, Madasi, or Tina, she said, Sheba de says Togu Regu Mabasire, Dugi Mo Mare. You depame Kutale Trubashin, Sheba de Kutak Yenichan, Dugi Yenica Trubuna, Sheba de Sufutubura, Kado da Yida, Tinde Yude, Tindisco, Dio Marcio, or Dindi, Dedindo. Ah, Shanky Jan, Koala, Toma Meba, 2 days. Simjangan me Sato give a drink maybe. The made Namshi member, Namshi can name me wrong answer. Do you to Namshi, you may answer. Do you Namshi, Namshi, so to go to Gumdwasi, oh, this is Dona.
So then refuting the idea that samsara has a beginning is divided into 2 points. The first of these is refutation by reason of the non-pervasion of the reason proving that samsara has a beginning. So basically laying out a correct reason for the beginninglessness of samsara, and then refutation by reason of the contradiction in pervasion. So here, this is refuting the idea again of some of those like materialists who would believe that we are newly born as humans in samsara. So we come about or are new with our conception. And so here it says then in the first part of 164c, it also can be proven because the non-mental is not the substantial cause of the mental. So going down to the commentary, samsara can also be proven beginningless by other reasons because it is not reasonable that sentient beings are newly born without previous lives. Such is not the case because the non-mental is not suitable to be the substantial cause of the mental. So in terms of a newly born human being, for example, the substantial cause of this life's body is the sperm and egg of the mother that develops and so forth. But in terms of consciousness, the substantial cause of consciousness must be consciousness. It wasn't that our consciousness was newly established at that time of conception, because consciousness is distinct from form. If consciousness were, or from matter, I should say, if it were the material or matter that gave rise to or were the substantial cause of mind, then it should have the characteristics of form and color and so forth. And that isn't the case. Rather, mind has this nature of clear awareness, clear and knowing, and that then needs to come from a cause of a similar type, a cause that accords with that. And so the material, the non-mental, is unable to give rise to consciousness. In the same way, like if we want to have a nice hot chili pepper, we have to plant the correct kind of seed. If we want to have a sweet one, we've got to plant the right seed in order to give rise to that particular result. It's got to be of a similar type. And in the same way, our mind is established as being, as coming from a cause of a similar type, as in a cause that was a previous moment of consciousness. If it were to have arisen solely from the form or from a matter, then it would have to have those kinds of qualities of form or of matter, and we can see that it doesn't.
This one,
Yeah, do so.
oh yeah, Tandirida, Kalsura. Getting over Tomje and Namshin, Nudenshi do Nase, Sawadiri. Getting over Tomje Sigura, Namshi Kibe, Yelengi, you, Yelengi, Nuba Namshi, Mishewa than Dembesher, Namshi member, Namshi Yele, member, Namshi member, Shebe Yele member, to sing Kuba Dodo Shenas, Kaji Sigura. And the Lam getting into Jambimba, Jambimba, Kochawagama Yomare, Shiba, the Ganga, so Volatani, Katuki, Siora, Tako Siora, oh, Namshi member, Namshi Yele, in Siomar, Namshi Yele, Namshi Yores, Tanzembage, Devana Shisha, Tanzembage, Tanzembage, Cochiso says you are Chiso, Chiso, the Mobu Tamjegi, Shibabu Injera. Tela ngobo drebu kanga neba ngoba misere sujin drebu de yosiriba chito kapso drebu chito le drebu kanga kire neba yore chito ne kapso drebu kanga yore ngoba misere suji yore no sugi to sayo marmato yore tilto zulia mario na shire omalia Mada, show me service to you, so I think I should see what I didn't do when I should say you. Getting over Tamje, Namshi gave a Yelengi, and getting over Tamje, Namshi gave a Yelengi Niba, Namshi Misewa than Debit. Nobody Musum get Tongo Marama, don't go Tamje, Namshi gave a Niba Yore. Get the so good you want to do Namshi gave a Niba Yore, Namshi Yore, Namshi Nama, Namshi Chimaki Arese, Namshi Misewa to you Arese, Transembe the one I shall have you. Namshi member Shebe Nyele Mimba Namshi Maimba Shebe Nyele Sigma the thing all the troops to buy Namshi Nyele Chess Junga Kangal Namshi Gilliva Namshi Misera Sigura TV Kuchi in Sigura Kambemba Zembe Dovana Shila Piore or Tilana Wodilia Kula Debu Tamje Nebe Moriatus Kukangal Debu Tamje Nebe Mova Misera Sigurus or Kutu Sumangan Jabukio Messi or Kambem Watina Shisura Kula Debu Tamje Nebe Moriatus Translation Suyan Taralu Palagera Ralu transition Tedar Chebe Soa Cheba Metabada or the transition develop transition by ina and you gangal debu years you are you do some again debu messi you are the transition develop translation Shanda to tell Maris. She translation Suyan Tedar Chebe Soa Cheba Metabada or transition love nation Shanda again to tell Lave Topsi Chair or Maris or can be your Mozada Cheba Lobe can be Kerani or can they Zaso Zandam Sigaria, launching Gaius, launching Gamisera Sudike, Nivayore, Telesentation Diore, in the castle. Namshi Misera Sudi, Yana launching Gamisera Sudi, or Tikara Transemba Mado, Kenan Deva Madese. Transition Mozada Cheba Lombes, Kaba Yobata, Benegonse, Ku Tasso Senase. Sandra Senaso, Sakan Jigania, Lange Jackie and Niva Yosida. It didn't Lange Jamisera to use a Lange Jayus about it. Tanzema to Silla, but a Keranda did the Logama Rosa. When say, you just said and Jebu Lange, Gamaton, I said to Yodo, she again, Mawa, Tanzan Sudan driver. Dubai Embassy or children, she told the some time met to get the Kawai or the Kango Kangali Lange Japan Trumbu Mambo Yose, Labiora. Sudan driver, you say this or Tijilamna.
Oh. So here, then continuing with this verse, the kind of response to this. So, sorry, the opponent first is going to say, well, okay, we are responding with, because all entities possess an unclear mind that has the capacity to be the substantial cause generating mind, we accept that it is proven that it is already established that the non-mental is not the substantial cause of the mental. So here you have those that would be like sort of materialists or Tarvakas who are only thinking that the elements are this or the non-mental can act as the substantial cause for the mental because we only have this life. Well, here it's turning to a refutation of the kind of Samkhya idea that they believe that there's like a sort of general principle wherein all of it is able to affect all results, to bring about all results. But actually they go beyond that to say that the results already exist in the cause, but are somehow unclear or are unmanifest. So when it comes to the physical elements and so forth, they all have the capacity to generate mind. They can act as a substantial cause for mind, but that mind is not yet clear or not yet fully manifest. Like they would say, that there is within milk, there already exists butter and yogurt, but it's not yet manifest. It's not yet something that we're able to clearly perceive. So, Obviously, the Gyaltsab doesn't think much of this way of thinking when he says, "Who but a bovine Samkhya would make an argument expressing the idea that all results exist potentially in the cause?" So basically, this is the kind of view that they have, that all of these phenomena, all things that are pervaded by this prakriti or fundamental substance, have the ability to give rise to mind. And so the results already exist in the cause. So he continues, it follows that it is unacceptable so to argue, because you Lokayatas pride yourself on your sense of shame, sort of like, I thought you had more shame than this. So it follows that this reason pervades, because saying that on the tip of a blade of grass, etc., the prior cause, we could see 100 elephants, which are the eventual result, the bovine Samkhya makes that assertion. So basically, what he is saying is that to assert that the results already exist in the cause, but in kind of like an unmanifest state, or we can't yet fully perceive them, it leads to these sorts of absurd results. Like the tip of a blade of grass could be the cause of a future 100 elephants, but yet we can't perceive those kinds of those 100 elephants in an unmanifest or sort of unclear state. This really doesn't make sense.
Oh yeah, that children the should shake do it is lotion. Children the transit children driven the very current and the molasses or all the Dada Karasne. So the junior langer Namchayan, no Kanshi Nam Urvese. No ten armina, Chidart in the Yoga Juse. Jusa the Sasso Senaya, Lange Jayu Sigurati, number Chenich. Toya Yoresura, Junior Lane, Adama, number Shenitavina, Lange Jamu, Lange Toya Yomaresura. No Kanshi Nam Urvese, Lange Jimo, now a Julia, more than an armina, Yomara Toya Yomarsura. Chidart in the Yoga Juse, Lange Jayu Sigura, Kandis Yoresura. Jusa Society, touching Jusi, Tikan Lange Ja, Chega Doni, Dragamidosigura. Chidarian, Drebu. Chitaya Debu Tini Gyu Debu Lange to the Gyu Sala Soba Chila and Nivakanga Yose, Moru Yoga Jura Midebata, Te Gyu Yona, Lange de Gyu Sandabu Chik to the Yona, Julia number session Tasu Sinja, Jukavando Ten Taxation, Taxation, Mamuba, Yawasan, Devi, and Raya Maresura. Tasu Sinjan, Drebu Kanshi Nango to Jura Tene, Mari Jutu Naminellis, Drebu to Junagasu, Toyo Marisa, Rayo Marisura. Ipsum Salani, Desha on the camera.
So then continuing, sort of explaining why it is that this Samkhya assertion is described as bovine, he says the reason this is bovine is this: how will that result exist in some form in the cause? It follows that it is unacceptable that it so exists, because when we seek the result that exists in some form in the cause, then even if we divide that cause 100 times and analyze it, that form that is suitable to appear as some resultant form will not appear previously at the time of the cause. So basically, this refutation is based upon the fact that the Samkhyas are asserting that somehow the results must exist at the time of the cause. But it's totally unacceptable, because if you analyze, if you examine that cause, if you divide it up even 100 times, you can't find something, a form that is suitable to appear as the resultant form that wasn't previously there at the time of the cause. So this is an unacceptable kind of proposition to assert that somehow the result already exists at the time of the cause.
Oh, yeah, that's Georgia. Georgia, not Georgia.
So we will then stop there and take questions for the evening. So I have a written question that's going to come first. And it's kind of a long question, and I don't know that I have translated it completely accurately, but I will do my best. I'm going to try to kind of summarize it. So, whether or not the ultimate view of selflessness as it's presented in the Pramana literature is that of any of the four schools, like whether or not that is the case, as it says in the Uttara Tantra or the Sublime Continuum, the perfect Buddhakaya is all-embracing. Suchness cannot be differentiated, and all beings have the disposition, thus they always have Buddha nature. So here in this context, when one is discussing this Tathagata essence or this abiding nature, this clear light nature of mind that abides in the continuum, that is naturally within the continuum of all sentient beings since beginningless time. And we talk about how the stains are adventitious, that they aren't in the nature of that mind. So is there a connection between that Tathagata Garbha or that Buddha nature, or is there a difference between that and the lucid kind of knowing, the clear knowing awareness of mind? Oh yeah. Ta chiwa os ringbo chikye ta ani genla seme shungne sungbe dagmegi tawa tartuk de duta shibo kangi lu yimin ta gyulam konda di chiwa di tes ringbo resha
야, 대지가 말해.
lo ta gyulamargi kapsu zoksan yeku konda zoksan kuni trochir tang deshin ni yerme chirtang Rikyu chirnan lu chen kun taktu sangye nyingbo chen
아래 리유신의 리유신 따도 상경이 붙이네.
lo ani di kapsu deshe nyingbo am di sem yi rangshin sawa di tang sem salri ki cha tang keba yorebes deshe nyingbo tang sem salri ki cha
뭐래? 아야야. 귤라말레로와
no
식도 가르사?
아니 직제 되게
조사꾼이
값은
초치다. 귤라말레 조사꾼이 초치다. 세테르베.
로 디레시다
조사꾼이 초치다. 디신이 미치다. 리유신의 리유신 그 따도 상경이 붙여야 되더라.
라레
상경이 붙여야 상경이 붙여다. 심세리 좀디 지과를 배시기와라.
케바 요레베 케바 유메
아래래래. 야야야. 그 조사꾼이 초치다 하셔. 어래. 속에 산재 좀 된데 남지 조사꾼이 초치다. 산재게니 최선벌어 소바텐데 최선부여라. 조사꾼이 초치다. 디신이 미쳐. 심제 탐제다. 산재이나다 자주선바이나다. 심지 춘이 디신이들의 개발요 말에 선부여라. 심랑신지 주어 말에. 나란주 심 니모체나 니모체인데 랑신지 주어 말에. 미시베 몽바체 랑신지 주어 말에. 랑은에 주어 말에 선부여라. 땡지 레번 중한테. 랑은에 똥바래 선부여라. 진짜 심비 춘이 디신이데 개발요 말에서 상마 산제다 심전다 가가 지단 지바래 선부여라. 디신이 미치다. 디신이 심비 내로 똥바니 들이야 개발요 말에서 디신이 Regional Luzen without Sanjay Yubucha. This was a Simja Tamja Simdi. Nazo Simdi Yamocha in but the Rangshinji Truyana. And Yamocha in Batagua Diagram, Yamotaya Yumare. Contra the Rangune Rangshinji Trubayina, and the Contra Daya Yungumarwa, Mishiba Mombase Yungumarwa. Timares, Rangshinji Trubamares. Tene Tishin is simply Nelu than something more, Neta Tatuk Nelu di Chibares. Tishin Yi Mishla. This was a Simjan Tamjala Sanje Rilio Resora. Simjan Tamjala Sanje Rilio Rese. The Rig de la Shalzu Medayora. Tanda de Simjan Beluchan, Rig Siduzakoya. The Karsora. Sami Shiji Sabese. Ranshinere da Genjuji Rixini Yungora. Ranshinere Simjan Bachana. Simjan Assembly Yako. Nikarsora. Sami Shijimo, Jurung Gengi, Koran Rangshingi, Nubachi Yores or Paksachi Yores or Tele Rangshin Risigra. Diatini Kenji Sweat of Jaya, Yajet, Tobacha Sambajan, Yajet Rudon, Tele Kenjurgi Risigua, Semzamba, Tadanda de Semzambelucina, what did it Ritira? Rangiba the Tosia, Tombani, Rich and Luzen, Tadu Sanjay Nimuchese. Sanje di Rigore, Sanje di Nimbucere, Sanje di Rigio Gangresugora, Sanje di Rixide, Tanda Senta Melucine, Ranshineri, the Genju di Ringiora. Ranshineri said the Simjan Sama similar, Sagwa maybe Shijimo, Yurungi Pasacho, the Toma Mevana Yore, Sim series and Imbazambi, Sashi Rivengo, Imbazam Yamdosal, Sim Koran, the Sagwa maybe Shijimo, Yurungi, Rangi Bezuch and Yur Tungangi Richide. Keep Assam Nubatelia, Rangshin to never raise. Can you raise the Tenet Tabaja, Sambaja, Tambashela Sober Sanja Kovato, the Tosam Gosuchana, Sami Shiji Sabe, the Nuba Church Dura, the Nubaya Yen, the Genju raise. In the Samtam Belola Tira, and I'm doing that Simjatam de la Sanja Regulus, Simjatam de la, the same series said. Sembi Rangshin Yosawa, Timanam Luburuase, Tinam de la Shayora. Sembi Rangshin de Yosawa, Seve Rangshin Chere. Tima Kondo Naje, Mishi Pomba to the Luburji Timane, Kagan do Yore. Chudi Damare, Chud Yoksona, Yoga de Tanguare. Nambe Rangshin, Tonsa de Tamare. Ina Telia, Timbada, Tendeyana, called Luburuare, Tangu Yorese, or Tisongiora. Mangda Masa. How did you love the Tambo?
No. So, okay, here, when it comes to this verse from the Uttara Tantra, where it says the perfect Buddhakaya is all embracing. This is referring to the truth body of the Buddha enacting deeds for sentient beings, like teaching and so forth. But here, the perfect Buddhakaya is all embracing. Suchness cannot be differentiated, and all beings have the disposition, thus they always have Buddha nature. So this here is getting at the fact that the nature of our mind is such that it isn't intrinsically existent. It doesn't have this kind of fixed or inherent nature such that it can't be transformed. So here, that the emptiness of any kind of inherent existence or intrinsic existence of the mind is the same for us as sentient beings as it is for that empty nature of the mind, the lack of some kind of inherent or true existence is the same for all beings. That nature of the mind is the same for ordinary sentient beings as it is for Buddhas or Bodhisattvas. So if it were the case that our minds were inherently existent with these stains, then there would be no way to remove those. There would be no way to transform or improve upon our mind. So the ultimate nature, as in the lack of any kind of inherent or intrinsic existence of the mind, is the same for Buddhas and for ordinary beings. And because the mind has this nature, we then all have the ability, as it says in this verse, this disposition, we all have this Buddha lineage, the ability to become fully enlightened. Now, when it comes to what this is referring to, there are differences between the various tenant schools. So when it comes to a mind-only kind of understanding, they would say that there is a kind of naturally abiding Buddha nature. And this is and what can transform into the nature, it's like the seed that can transform into the nature of uncontaminated wisdom. And then there is the sort of Buddha nature that is brought about by conditions. So by actually meditating and increasing the sort of power of those propensities, we are able to then become fully enlightened. So they would point to these two sort of nature of mind in terms of there being a naturally abiding kind of nature or a propensity, ability to give rise to this uncontaminated wisdom. And then that comes about through actually cultivating certain practices. So, and then when it comes to the understanding of a Madhyamaka practitioner, this nature of mind as being empty, as not having any kind of intrinsic existence, means that our stains, those our various afflictions and so forth, are things that are adventitious. They are suitable to be removed because they're not intrinsic to the nature of the mind.
Different.
No.
Oh yeah, that day tanda ngazo. Tanda kila mala somebody umaba lu shisha chela. Ane sembi chuni tomba ni de la kogora. So kone troji da tishini me cheta se. Sembi chuni liya nelu tadu le keba yo mare sombi wala. Riyu chena lu jen go se kanga te sonda sembi rangshin takwa jure da. Shebe kanga shinya yoba kyan kanga zoya yoba te. Ko sembi rangshin ki truba mare. Temba truba mare, temba truba meza. Niko sangye yore kanga che yore to. Temba truba ina, ene rang yamo chengi sem temba truba ina, sobju tanya ke yomar to. Ke sonda rangi be kapsu ne sembi chunyi dilya rang shineri shagura.
So then, according to the middle way, the Madhyamaka schools, they would say this nature of mind, the mind's emptiness, is something that is possessed by all sentient beings. Have such an empty mind, that it is the case that these adventitious defilements are not something that are really truly established or are intrinsically established, and thereby it is possible that they can be removed. We are able to get rid of those. And so when it comes to all sentient beings, Buddhas included, this empty nature of the mind is the same for all of them. Like it says in this verse, suchness cannot be differentiated.
Oh yeah.
So are there other questions?
There's one from the Abbey.
Hi, Katrina. My question comes from page 351, from the very beginning of the nature of suffering, the outline. And I think I was hoping that Geshe could maybe provide the context. I was thinking, like, if I was going to ask somebody what is an example of the truth of suffering, the last thing I would think of would be to start saying that proving samsara is beginningless. So I was wondering, is it because of who they're talking to? If I was going to talk to a scientist who is a materialist, the last thing I would think about was to go that direction. I think I would have to start some other place. But is it because of who they're talking to that you're like walking into a conversation and here's where they go?
Yeah. Let me just get to that section here. 아니, 속당 십자 둔슈도 찍라?
Dunge Tushi. Yeah. Dunge Tushi.
도 찍라? 둥양 덴베, 디 옌랑기 튼러와? 둥양기 덴발라 니스, 둥양기 덴베 센시 드루바당, 디 센니 셰바오스. 다, 사웨케 kapsu di dunya korwa chempung pos.
Kene?
Chiwa dire ta nganso dunya ki pe ti kogorwa ani di pe kya 가르치는 di kogyores. Dunya korwa chempung
Kandese, Shodan, Shibet Dunji Dunshirava,
dochik
Shodan Shibet Dunji Dunshirava,
shipya
Dunji. Yeah, what's your day? Yeah, Dunji Dunji Ore,
Dunya ngot zungwa di dunya korwa chempung pos par
Yeah.
kogirwa
Tene?
ani digi sambala 가르치는 배디 거기요레스.
Oh, Karichene?
가르치는 dunya korwa chempung pos di 배 jargi요레스. tis ko kale kakpo marwa anso sepa sena ta hey shempa chikla I'm sorry, can you gonda gang salpochi komason konsogi tua. Can you just repeat the question in English again? I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble
Okay, I'll try to
processing it.
get the most of it, but I'll just shorten it then. So the outline says, proving the example of the truth of suffering. So say I'm going to talk to a scientist. The last thing I would think about would be to prove that by saying samsara is beginningless. So I'm wondering if what is the context here? Is it because they're talking to the Shravakas, or if Geshe could maybe explain the context of why it comes across this way?
So, lasso again, ani dungel dembe senshi drupala karichene korwa tokma mebar drup kores. Tangbo di drup gerwa?
Yeah.
Ani pagogi tawala tune di drupia kechembo tsigiore karichene korwa la tokma mebar drup kores.
Yeah. Oh.
Kecheshana nganso sen ripa chiktan sepa tsena o dunyangi temba senshi dires drup kogiyuna di korwa tokma mepa drupia karichene di kechembores.
Ore, Ore, ta tunge demba situ kole ya juyo gora. Tunge demba inde juyo gora. Ani ko kewa ngama leda yomba latene yongo yora. Tada ngazo chende mi lede sakja nyele de pungula soba pungunga bo de sigora. Ti teni tanda sarva tuba mare. Sende jangjala mide sarva tu pungbu sarva tu sem sarva tu sama sarva tuba mare sigora. Ti sarva tuba ina ni kewa ngama mega chagira. Kewa ngama mena ni kunjun demba da le jumbe tezu namsha yo marwa. Sende tunge je pumbu de ngazul yebe pumbu ngabu de yani tunge koa che pumbu se tunge demba re de koa la koa che je pumbu yebe se shara koa la koa se ngama chele che teni tanda de yo ya chele do konge de le kora se ge wara tange ma kane yo bersne tinge ma kyo ngama yo se chi koara ti mena ni sarva le yora ni demba shi na yo to marwa Temba shitting ya kunju temba de yonto marwa. Oti indi ko thoma meba tumene doa re to nale kichi chine chi do dos tumenyo ki pungo langdor cha do ne tunge wasam ko gira. Sende tunge janja marwa sende tunge saya tunge koya kange janja shegyo mara. Sende kega nashila sobe tunge tu shegyo ara. Teso kandesu yungo resna o te kyo ngama le sane tende yungo rese. Chugurwa chizan kewala thoma meba matuna ini temba shi langdo tuwe yo mare kunju yungu mare tunge yungu mare ini tarwa tuwe yungu marwa sendi sarwa ina ini tso sone be tsora ini tarwa tuwe da sanje koba tuwe keji she kosa yo mara chizan ko kechembu.
Okay, so here, when it comes to first proving the example of the truth of suffering, why then it turns to proving that samsara is beginningless? Well, it's actually, this would be equally important whether you're refuting like a charvaka or a scientist, because in this case, we are seeking to prove that suffering has a cause. And again, it's not just talking about the kind of suffering that is normally identified as suffering, but this suffering of pervasive of conditioned existence. So giving this example of these 5 contaminated aggregates, these suffering contaminated aggregates are suffering, this is something that you then would ask, well, is that newly established? Was it the case that this set of aggregates just came into being in this very life? Well, no, we are establishing that it was not something newly established, because then there would be sort of no way to have the presentation of the Four Noble Truths. You wouldn't have a kind of causality whereby our suffering actually comes about through karma and the afflictions, and there's a way to reverse that. So we establish then for someone that, say, doesn't believe in past lives that, well, these suffering aggregates actually had to come from somewhere before. There's no way that they just newly arose. And so this is why then it's important to prove that there are past and future lives. If you haven't proved that there are past and future lives, you can't really understand what we're talking about in terms of the suffering of samsara, the suffering of having to repeatedly take rebirth and experience birth, aging, sickness, and death, and actually look at the causality that leads us to experience that. And then the rest of the truths in terms of how you avert that, how you remove the causes of that suffering and achieve a cessation from that. So if you can't prove to somebody that samsara is beginningless, that there are past and future lives, then none of the presentation of the Four Noble Truths actually makes any sense or really has any purpose for them. So if there is no past lives, then there's no way to remove the kind of causes that are leading to our suffering and so forth. So there would be no way to have liberation, and all of those kinds of consequences would entail. So when it comes to then identifying suffering and proving what suffering is, it's actually pretty crucial to prove that samsara is beginningless. Does that get at that question?
Jisong
Do so.
moya ni timeto yo shinda de ta te do sa moya ni timeto jo mena.
So if there are no other questions, then we'll call it a night or a session. Is there another question?
Yes?
There's one online.
Okay. There is one online question.
Okay.
There
Tiwa
might be
Shimpa Chiktu.
a shorter question.
Oh,
So
teacher.
through habituation, our afflictive emotions get stronger. In this process, does our innate view of the perishable collection or innate ignorance also get stronger?
No. 아니, nganso gi nyumong komchi la tene shukcheru drogarwa,
Mare,
decha gina karigina, ine decha shukcheru droda, ta dangzin yang shukcheru drogrebes.
Ine,
Nganso nyumong denso di rikta ngama gi wangi chungirwa, ani komchi
Mare,
yuna di shukcheru drogres. Ine nganso
Mare,
decha dawo shukcheru drona komchi gi wangi dangzin lengye yang shukcheru drogrebes. Ngar zin yang dangzin yang shukcheru drogrebe.
Mea, Tene, do the Vesere,
Drogrebe.
Mare,
Duchak shukcheru drona in komchi shukchambo yuna dangzin yang shukcheru drogrebes. Tiwa dire.
Mare, Tene,
Kona.
Adon Zimbabwe Shuk Chamber Yude, Dagi Koko, Neda, Luda, Lonjuda, and it's the Zolea, Shinja Shuk Chamber Yungura. The
No,
Zolea
yune
Shinja Shuk.
dil shencha shukchambo yuna di dangzin yang shukcheru drogrebes. Dila dokcho.
Mare, Chashi Shuk Chamber Yuna, called Danzin Shuk Chamber Dora. Jizam Shuk Chamber Yudelico, Shinja Shuk Chamber Yuna, Tesam Yugi Ramune, you don't want to be some of the Shuk Chamber Dora. You Ramune, you don't want to Gali Ramune, Kesam Telegani Shuk Chamber Dora. Yamdo Yungura. Tangzin the tension and Nico Yungura, Yamdosa Yungura. Chako Opel Rosonet and I see Chamber you to Ramune Tuba Ramshi to Toddy. Semza Belucene, Ramune Tuba Uma Belucena, Nitigra.
No.
Ramune Tuba, Nijituba, Tayana Kotaya, you did Ramune Tuba and Simba Shuksha Dura. And you can't do Shuksha Sagada. No day,
No. So our various afflictions do arise from previous habituation, but they're actually all sort of based upon grasping at a self. So when we have a strong kind of affliction, that actually is then reinforcing and also strengthening that grasping or apprehension of an I. So when we say have attachment and we see something as being particularly pleasant and our attachment is growing, it's also increasing that kind of apprehension of things as having some kind of real existence being established from their own side. Now there would be different ways of sort of positing what that grasping is, that fundamental grasping, whether you're talking about mind only or the middle way, Madhyamaka schools, but at least in terms of the Madhyamaka, thinking about something as having some kind of intrinsic existence from its own side, that thought goes along with the afflictions and increases. So is that okay? Do we have any more questions here?
No more tonight.
Okay. Tadiksong.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow also. And we'll end with our dedication prayer.
Okay.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path and all spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lapsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends.
Hola.
Good to know.
Ya, gracias.
So,
Oye.